would like to open it up to questions if you have any. We have two people with microphones in order to be able to record what you say. If you'll just raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you and just address it to either one of the gentlemen.
I think Dr. White is the one who mentioned this. Did I hear correctly that a percentage of the St. Johns River is actually coming from ancient seas, so that it begins even in its headwaters as somewhat salty water?
Right. Yeah, we have, as part of the karst topography, there is large quantities of salt water trapped underneath the ocean, underneath Florida, and it's gradually flowing in.
But what percentage is that? What percentage of the river actually originates as salty water? A small, teeny weeny bit of?
No, I'm not sure I want to say originates in salty water. It's just a component of it.
But it's coming up from underneath the earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
So is the other part, how does it become fresh? I'm a little confused on that. I mean, because for the most part, farther south, it's fresh. It's considered fresh water, isn't it?
Okay, this is where I need a blackboard.
Sorry, I'm a
You gotta
former
remember,
student.
you got to think about the origin of Florida. And you got to go back literally millions of years when the peninsula of Florida didn't exist. We are essentially the Appalachian Mountains that have washed down to Florida. And in fact, I think that's one reason a lot of people in Jacksonville go back to North Carolina in the summertime. They don't understand the connection. That's what's going on. Well, as part of this was going on, the chemical reaction that occurred was one in which we created a calcium carbonate deposit that is the base for Florida. And as part of that, salt water got trapped, as well as when the land was eventually formed, and you've got to understand you've got sea level going up and down during this whole period. We also trapped fresh water. Well, then when it sort of came back to where it is now, what you've got is fresh water percolating back down through it, also these pockets of salt water. Then you also have salt deposits, and the fresh water is flowing through the salt deposits. That's also picking up some of the salt. So it's not like it's just one nice, clean piece. It's all these little pieces that sort of explain this whole thing.
So, but, I mean, is it a very large percentage? I guess the reason I'm asking the question is I'm trying to think how this affects the biology. How does it affect the plants and animals that are on the St. Johns?
Oh, it does. I mean, you've got areas like Salt Run that you have blue crabs and other, quote, marine kind of species living in those areas because there's enough ions there to allow them to survive. I don't know if I know a number percentage-wise. I'm looking at Bill and...
But most of it is considered, it's not a significant source of salt unless you're at one of these bubble ups.
Right.
Okay. That's
right.
Kind of what
My question is, because we're taking water out of the Florida aquifer at such a high pace and we're not replenishing it fast enough, what are your thoughts and opinions, and can you explain a little bit about maybe the idea of tapping the intermediate aquifer and what might happen from that?
Well, I think Bill made the point that it's all sort of one big thing of water, and surface water and groundwater are all interconnected. And we're pulling it out faster than it's going in. And I don't care where you pull it out from, we're still pulling it out faster than it's going in. So all you're doing is raising up, and you're not going to get, quite frankly, the same quality of water. It'll be more expensive because you're going to have to treat it. I'm a big believer that we've got to do more in conservation. I just think we've taken water too for granted. The fact that we use half the water we pull on the aquifer outside the home to water lawns is just not something that's sustainable. We're not going to be able to continue doing that. You want to pitch in? I mean,
I read something recently where 85% of the water used is by business, not by housing and watering their yards. Is that true? I mean, people use 15% of the water, not the major part.
I don't know a good number. I don't know. I'm looking at Neil or Bill. Y'all? What percentage is used by business and industry as opposed to individuals? Yeah. There's a lot of controversy over how we actually calculate water use. When you start talking about per capita water use, and I'm going to use myself as an example, you know, my wife and I work hard to be very water conscious at home. Well, but I also go out every morning and exercise at a sports club, and I take my morning shower is taken there. So that doesn't count against my home consumption, but as a person per capita is all part of it. And so when you look at water use in an office building, for instance, it's all part of per capita consumption. So that's why it gets a little difficult sometimes to decide exactly who's using what water where. I think what gets attention is the consumptive use permits in some large consumers that rely on a lot of water, be it paper manufacturing, some sort of other industrial process, or aquaculture uses a lot of water. So you see very large numbers associated with that.
I have a question as a person who would love to get out in nature more. Looking at this woman who did the solo paddling. I guess this is for Belleville. And watching you do the cave diving, I'm obviously concerned about alligators. How did she have somebody, you know, with an armed guard, you know, going with her? I mean, no, really. I mean, you know, I would love to be able to get out in nature more, but you know, I'd like to live a few more years. If I go, I don't want to go that way. So how dangerous? Like for instance, there are not a lot of alligators in these little cave pools.
There are no alligators in caves. No.
Okay, because I saw the fish, so I figure there might be some life in there.
Well, I mean, we all contextually have the opportunity to go outside and to have a natural experience. It doesn't have to be in a cave, and in fact, I would recommend that most people don't go in, because unless you've had training, unless you feel really, really comfortable, this is not going to work. But find what your comfort level is, and then allow that to happen. And I have to say that I've written 6 books and have done 8 or 9 films and stuff, and I've never had the conceit that anything I've written or produced is going to change anybody's mind. I've always hoped that it would lead them to the edge of a swamp, of a spring, of a river, of a scrub. They would have then the experience themselves. They would have their own experience in which they connected with place. Nature predates thought. And from that experience would come a sense of caring that would develop into an ethic of stewardship. But they have to originate that themselves. I can't tell them what to do. I can rant and rave once in a while because I'll get frustrated. But what has more power is to tell a story, which has great power over time. We were telling stories around campfires long before we started writing things down and making movies. The stories have an integral role in the human psyche. And we just really have this timeless need for a story to explain how things work, why things are the way they are. So if I can tell a reasonably decent story, and that's what the new book and some of my other books are about, telling stories, weaving some natural facts, maybe a bit of enchantment into that story, then from there, maybe folks might be motivated to go out and have an experience. And I don't tell you what kind of experience to have. You decide that for yourself based on how your comfort level, again.
I still don't know how dangerous it is, the solo paddle. I mean, did she have like a gun or a spear? Okay,